Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at Logiq's channel. Just want to let you all know what we're going to be doing with this interview series. We'll be running through company updates and industry updates, answering any questions you guys have for us. So if you have any during any of this, please don't be shy and send them over. We will, of course, be introducing members of the team and talking to them about their background. So who better to kick us off for video number one than Chief Executive Officer Brent Suen. Brent, how are you doing today? You ready to talk about yourself a little bit?
Oh, lovely. Doing very well. Thanks, Mike.
Perfect. Glad to have you on. What I really want to do is let people know a little bit about you first, since you're going to be coming on a lot. So paint a picture of your past experience for us and let us know, like, what's the spark in this for you?
Wow. You have a few hours? No. Okay. No, I think professionally speaking, or at least we try to say that around here. I began my career on Wall Street back in 1987, right after the stock market crashed, and I was just turning 20 years old. So not only was I new to Wall Street, but I was pretty much new to finance. I started out as an assistant to a trader at a firm named Bear Stearns, which back in the 80s and prior was quite legendary in what's referred to as merger arbitrage, or merger arb, which is basically just takeovers, hostile takeovers, friendly takeovers, buyouts, mergers and acquisitions. So that's how I started out. There was a bit of a reshuffling because the whole senior team left and went to a competitor, and I was promoted very quickly. And so I became a senior trader very quickly at the ripe age of 20. What was interesting back in the late 80s, Mike, is that a number of very large buyouts occurred, which were kicked off by what was referred to at the time as the junk bond craze, which are basically a means of companies to finance themselves. They also call it high yield debt. Anyway, it was a very valuable tool that enabled what has become prevalent in mergers and acquisitions, financing. And so I basically cut my teeth in a time that was very exciting and very transformative for Wall Street and for corporate takeovers. So that's how I started. Interestingly, there were only a handful of tech companies that were publicly traded back then. Apple, Microsoft, and Intel are the ones that come to mind. Hewlett Packard, but it was relatively new, relatively nascent, and so it was very exciting to see how technology evolved in a short period of time and actually helped transform Wall Street. What most people today take for granted, where we can trade online, we have a ton of information at our fingertips. Back when I was doing it, you could only speak to a representative of a public company or an analyst, and you had to do so by phone or in person. There was no internet or electronic trading. So what was very fascinating at the time ended up leading me to leave the industry 6 years later and move to Silicon Valley, where another revolution was kicking off, and that was the whole .com revolution. And I started a venture fund with several of my former colleagues and friends, and we participated in a number of financings of companies that were early pioneers in business-to-business e-commerce, business-to-consumer e-commerce, online payments, software as a service, stuff like that, which, today is, you look at it and go, wow, that stuff's all old school, PayPal, eBay, Amazon. But that's when they started. They all started up then, and we were in the thick of things back then. And so I spent the years from 1996 until 2003 doing just that. So participating in, investing in, advising on tech financings, IPOs, M&A. And so that's how I got my start, a combination of finance on Wall Street and finance and tech in Silicon Valley. So that's what I did.
Well, let me jump in for a second. It's interesting. So you've got to see the evolution of technology working its way into capital markets, essentially from before it was there to where it is here today. And as you said, while modernly we may take it for granted, I imagine it was a big boon when it kicked on in terms of relieving a lot of bottlenecks related to trading and information finding and so on for a lot of these companies. So now you're essentially you're in the tech sector now. So how did you wind up becoming the chief executive officer of Logiq? Give us that story.
Sure. Well, not to get too detailed, but from 2003 until 2016, I actually lived in Asia. So I moved from San Francisco when I left the whole .com era,
Okay.
and I moved over to Asia because most of the Asian markets related to tech didn't get hit as hard when we had the .com crash, and
Mhm.
so a small team and I moved over to Hong Kong, and we spent the next decade working on the same stuff that we did in Silicon Valley, but for on behalf of Asian companies that were looking to do the same type of things.
Mhm.
Find strategic partners in the US and in Europe, make acquisitions, be acquired, go public. So we made a business of that. And then in 2014, I started what is now Logiq. So a friend of mine, Eddie, who's from Singapore, he and I started the business together. It was just the two of us. We didn't have a garage, but we started in his living room, and so that's how we started what is now Logiq. We used to go under a different name, Wayland. But yeah, that's how we started out, and that was man, that was 8 years ago. So
Wow. That's a very classic story, classic starting, like you said, not quite a garage, but starting at home, entrepreneurship kind of kicking off. So then walk me through. So again, we're gonna do a whole overview, company overview over Logiq in the next video, everybody. But Brent, the last thing I really want to know about you is like now walk me through what it means to be the chief executive officer of Logiq. Like what do you actually handle on the day-to-day? Deconstruct it for us.
sure, I think you have to look at what brought a person to where they are, and what influences they had earlier on that really shaped them. Um, on working on Wall Street at Bear Stearns, it was, although it was a proper Wall Street firm, it was very different from some of the bigger names that are still around, like Merrill Lynch or Goldman Sachs,
Mhm.
um, because we had very much of an entrepreneurial spirit there, and very much of a contrarian perspective. In
Yeah.
fact, when I started there, the market had just crashed. Everyone on Wall Street was firing and laying off, and people were retrenching. The CEO of Bear Stearns, Alan Greenberg, he said, so we're going to do just the opposite, because right now is the best time to be hiring, because
Mhm.
that's where you'll find the best talent. Right now is the best time to be expanding. Right now is the best time to be aggressive in investing, because no one else wants to. And historically, throughout the ascent of mankind, opportunistically, when you get aggressive at times of in times of fear, you usually end up winning.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that was an early lesson that I learned. And then in Silicon Valley, one thing that really captured the whole spirit of what I think still defines technology broadly is that even if you are in a leadership position, you had to start somewhere. And at that starting point, you had to roll up your sleeves and you had to say, no matter what my title is, I'm still going to do everything needed to help build this business.
Mhm.
And if you carry that with you, it helps you identify with your team, regardless of what skill sets they have, or regardless of what their position or title is. If you know how to do things and you can lead next to someone, and they respect you because you've earned that respect by doing the same things, or at least trying to. Man, I can't write code, but I can certainly cheer them on. But
Yeah, I get
for
you.
the most part, I will do a ton of admin, and I always have. I will do a ton of things that I think maybe people in the same position, but at much larger companies would say, "Oh gosh, I've got assistants to do that, or I've got other people." I think maintaining that humility, Michael, where you never say, "Oh, I'm too good to do something that a junior level staff would do. I try to embody that every day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've often thought about it as like well, one of the classic looks is like you're at the top, right? Top down look things. But if you invert it and you look at it more, not as an inverted pyramid, but more of like a bush or a tree or something, and you're at the root of it, and therefore are somewhat responsible for anything anybody will handle, and it's your responsibility to nurture that role and be largely, maybe not handling that role specifically, because like you said, you hire people smarter than you to handle specific tasks in that area. So I understand that fully, but to not feel above anybody when it comes to helping them or helping guide the business in the direction it needs to go.
Indeed.
Perfect. So, Brent, I guess last but not least, before we go, kind of a bonus question here. What would be the key message you want people to understand throughout the series, or the idea you really want to try to get across to them about Logiq?
About Logiq,
Mhm.
I think I know from the beginning, the goal has always been to enable the little guy, if you will. We've always served small to medium-sized businesses, but really we serve micro to small businesses. We started out that way when Eddie and I started the company in 2014, and we still do that today. Our main focus is small businesses, because unfortunately the playing field is not in favor of small businesses. It is in favor of some of those names I mentioned earlier, like the Amazons and the eBays of the world, and the Walmarts and the Targets, and then tech has its own subset of big players. But yeah, it's always been about empowering and enabling the little guy, if you will.
Perfect. Well, Brent, I think you did a great job introducing yourself and giving people a little bit of an origin story, so to speak. If anybody has any questions for Brent about his past experience or anything, let us know. And like I said, next time we'll do more of a company overview. So everybody, please stay tuned for that. Brent, thank you so much for your insight and your time today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks for having me, Mike.